Well, good afternoon and welcome to this short webinar on 360-degree feedback questionnaire design. My name's Colin Newbold and I'm founder of TLC Online, and I'm also the chief architect behind the Click 360 product. Okay, well, let's move on to a list of contents. This is what we're going to cover. 360-degree feedback. Is it a psychometric test? We're going to cover what psychometric tests are. We're going to look at aptitude tests, skills tests, personality tests. And we're also going to look at reliability and validity. I'm going to ask you the question at the end of this: do you think 360 is or is not a psychometric? And then we're going to look at what are you trying to measure, the ways in which 360 can be used, both in terms of assessment or development, and also how it tends to be kind of a voluntary thing in most organizations. People are invited to participate in it as a standalone intervention. It may help to inform the performance appraisal process, or it might be part of a leadership or management development program. So we'll look at the different ways it can be used. One new way that has emerged, and we'll cover this, is embedding cultural norms. I'll say more about that as we progress. And then we'll look at rules around questionnaire construction. We've got a couple of interesting sort of theses. We've got a couple of tips, if you like, that will help you in your questionnaire design. Okay, so let's move into the first part of this webinar session. And I'd like us to think about this question: is 360 a psychometric? There seems to be a lot of confusion out there about what kind of a test, and I use inverted commas around the word test. You know, it's in parentheses. What kind of a test 360-degree feedback is? I mean, only recently my company was asked to pitch for a bespoke 360 tool, and the tender document itself was headed 360-degree feedback, our new psychometric test. So what are psychometrics? Well, it's interesting because if you go back to the derivation of the word, it's from the Greek language. Psycho, meaning mental, and metrics, meaning measurement. There are three main areas that the tests explore: your capabilities, your aptitude for the job, and also to determine whether your personality fits in with the vision and the culture of the organization that you're hoping to join. Essentially, the tests are looking to objectively evaluate your intelligence, your aptitude, your personality, as well as how you handle pressure and your working style in general. Now then, psychometric tests are used to assess this is typical. They're used to assess a candidate's suitability for a role, whether they're a new hire or an existing employee seeking promotion. And as a result, the typical tests are numerical, verbal, and logical reasoning. Now, there are others, but these are the main ones that are used. Now, there's also a bank of skills tests, which represent a way for employers to evaluate how quickly you can learn a new skill to competently carry out the job you're applying for. And depending on the job you're hoping to secure, the test may include something such as designing a basic web page if you're applying to be a web designer, or a financial modeling task if you're applying for a quantitative role in finance. Both capability and skills tests are assessed through paper-based exercises consisting of multiple choice questions. And they're usually completed under exam conditions, although increasingly psychometric tests are completed online using specialist systems that remove the requirement for a paper-based test. Let's look at the other side of this, which is personality traits assessment and personality preferences inventories. Let's take the first one. Personality traits assessments enable employers to evaluate your suitability based on your past behavior and the way in which you approach your work. This will be used to determine how well you will fit into the organization and the culture of the business. Your responses will often be cross-referenced with those of a top-performing employee or a successful manager. And that'll be an indication as to whether you share the same characteristics. But personality preferences inventories simply ask how you prefer to work. What feels most comfortable for you? What requires the least effort? Myers-Briggs, or the MBTI, is one of the most commonly used personality preferences tests. And after progressing through a series of questions where you have to make a choice between two alternatives about how you would feel or act in a given scenario, you'll be assigned to one of 16 personality types based on your responses. Employers then review this personality type to see if you would fit in with their organizational culture and values. Working style here is very important because yours might clash, with the culture of the organization, or with your teammates, or with your boss. Let's look at how we measure a psychometric test. Okay, how are they evaluated in and of themselves? Well, the key concepts in classical test theory are reliability and validity. Let's just take reliability first. Test, retest, consistency. By the way, reliability is all about consistency. It's how reproducible are the results. So test, retest, consistency is a test of how stable the test would be over time. Would raters' scores be the same over a short period of time if there was no change in the participants' behavior? Now, the very fact that a 360 is designed to change behavior, doesn't that kind of preclude this kind of a test being valid? Internal consistency simply means do all the questions under a category heading truly measure that category? Logically, all people being measured would score the same for each question. Internal consistency should be within a range of about 0.65 to 0.85. If this reliability coefficient is low, then either the category contains too few items or the items have too little in common. Too high a number, and the category may contain more items than is actually necessary. Inter-rater agreement, that's the third item on this list. And that's really how much agreement is there among raters in the same group. Raters in the same group can reasonably be expected to share broadly similar perceptions. Very low inter-rater agreement may indicate that the category lacks clarity, or it could mean that some raters in the group are being treated differently. For example, one direct report may be receiving favoritism. Alternatively, as most raters are not trained observers, they could simply be understanding and interpreting those items differently. Now, let's look at validity. Because there are so many different measures used in validity, I do not intend to take you through each of these not on the webinar. What I can offer is a handout that contains information about both reliability and each of these validity measures. And if you stay to the end of the webinar, I'll share details on how you can get the handout, plus a copy of these slides. I will just, however, say a few words about face validity, as this is relevant to a 360 questionnaire. To test for face validity, you need to show the questionnaire to a representative group and get them to confirm that, number one, the questions are clear and unambiguous, and number two, the questions are relevant to that target population's jobs. All of that then having been said and shown is 360-degree feedback, a psychometric test. Now you've got a poll facility on the webinar software. If you scroll down, you'll see polls. And what I want you to do is just enter your answer to the question. Is it a 360? Is 360 a psychometric or not? Just hit one of those two buttons. Okay. So the majority of you are suggesting that it is not, and I would agree with that. I think we can assume that at best a 360 is considered as an opinion survey. I mean, it obviously helps if the questions being asked have reliability and validity, but because 360-degree feedback is not a recruitment or assessment tool, then the questionnaire doesn't have to stand up to the rigors of testing that you would expect from a psychometric tool. So I hope I've got that one out of the way. Let's move to the second section of this webinar, which is really all about what are we going to use it for? What are we trying to measure? Now, the first decision should be around whether you want to use 360 for assessment or development. Assessment, we just spent a bit of time agreeing that 360 isn't a psychometric test. Psychometric tests are used in assessment and selection, recruitment and selection. And if 360 is to be used in this way, and it can be, and it has been, but it will usually form part of the performance management or the performance appraisal process. This means that the outcome may have a direct impact on salary, on benefits, and ultimately on career progression. Is that what you want from a 360? Is there a danger that two peers undertaking a 360 in this context are going to reach prior agreement about what they will say about each other based on the potential far-reaching implications of the data? In other words, and I've struggled to find a slide that I could use to depict this, but you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. I'm not sure if you can make that out in the image that's on screen, but they're scratching each other's backs. You can see that. Actually, their necks in this case. So if that's true, then surely we're left with 360 as being a tool for the development of individuals. The outcome of a 360, pure and simple, it's a personalized, tailored, bespoke professional development plan. It's focused on behavior, something the participant needs to be doing or not doing, and or something they need to be saying or not saying. Let's go to the second poll, and let me ask you this question. What should 360-degree feedback be used for? Assessment, development, or both? Okay, well, it would seem that there are some favouring both, and there are more favouring development in the poll. Now, this is interesting because the development side is the most common use of 360, but you can indeed use it for assessment. You just need to be careful how you set this up, especially when it comes to briefing participants, but also you need to be mindful that it's not going to be as robust, if you like, as a psychometric test, as some other form of psychometric test. Okay. Now, let's look at in what ways you can use 360-degree feedback. Two things come to mind. The first is that 360 can be used either as a standalone, sort of on-demand method of developing leaders and managers, or alternatively, you can use 360 as part of, in fact, as a foundation stone, really, or certainly a key component of a leadership and or management development program. In both cases, the focus is on the development of leadership or management skills. At the same time, a 360 can perform another very useful function. And this is becoming more and more popular in our experience. Many organizations find that 360 is a vital component in the embedding process into the organizational culture of a new or a revised competency framework. And when I say competency, what I'm really meaning is knowledge, skills, behaviors, and values. It's a language particular to that organization. And as these are enhanced or rewritten or revised or revamped, then because 360 touches so many people in so many different areas, inside and even outside the host organization, and this is just purely by way of raters completing questionnaires, then the process of 360 reinforces those new competencies and, in a sense, shows what finished looks like. Now, there are other uses for 360-degree feedback. For example, we've got a questionnaire that measures the coaching capability of a line manager prior to and then some months after that manager undertakes training on how to be more of a coach to their staff, to have more coaching style conversations. And in fact, this before and after idea should be applied to all participants undertaking a 360, whatever your purpose. It would be especially true for leadership and management development programs. In other words, running a repeat 360 within 12 or 18 months allows you to track performance improvement. It provides a subjective measure of the impact of whatever development activities have been undertaken by participants in the interim. Notice that we shy away from advocating 360-degree feedback as a direct part of the performance management process. For example, the performance appraisal, for all the reasons that we've covered earlier. But we do appreciate that the results of someone's 360 can inform a later appraisal discussion. It's just that the two, in our opinion, should be kept separate, the two processes. We're going to talk next about some of the specific rules that we believe will help you around questionnaire construction. Now, I thought I'd show you some real life howlers that we've extracted from different client surveys over time. So these are all genuine questions that were used in surveys that our clients asked us to install in the software. No names, no pack drill, but as I show you these, use the chat box to tell me what you notice. Here's the first group. Yeah, clearly there's a lot of words in the examples on screen. There's more than one thing being asked in the same question. They seem overly long. Let's look at another batch. Again, use the chat box to tell me what you're noticing. And there's another set of questions as well that all of these are taken from, as I say, real life client examples. Different situations, different types of organizations. We've taken a selection, but I think the common theme is that they're overlong. Another theme that's coming through is that they ask for more than one thing at a time. They're tending to qualify the words within the question, which just makes it more difficult to read, and some are actually ambiguous. Where you're asking more than one thing, I don't quite know how you expect the rater to answer that. You should really separate them. These are not made up. These are genuine examples. Okay, so I think we're agreed that when we write any 360-degree feedback question, we should be looking to describe a specific observable behavior, or SOB as we call them. Now, to us, a specific observable behavior is something that the person is doing or not doing, and or saying or not saying. Let me say that again so you know it's important. Something I'm doing or not doing, and or something I'm saying or not saying. Yeah, that's really important, that every question that you ever draft for a 360 should meet those criteria, that definition. Okay, so let's look at some tips for good questionnaire writing. And I'm going to start with the rule of 7. Okay, now I'm going to qualify this right at the beginning. let's be clear, this is a stylized ideal. In reality, the rule of 7 will be almost impossible to apply. And anyway, it does need some qualification. It will be harder still to apply the rule of 7 if your questionnaire is being designed by a committee, because everybody wants to see a piece of themselves in the finished result. But keep in mind that stylistic or idealistic though this might be, there's a trend or a theme running through this. Hence, we call it the rule of 7. So to start with, there should be no more than 7 behavioral clusters in total. In actual fact, if you aim for between 30 and 40 questions overall, there may not even be enough room for 7. And just so that we're on the same page, the typical questionnaire structure that applies to our Click 360 application and many others looks like this. Okay, this is actually taken from our leader Q questionnaire, which is the one that we use more often than not with leaders. Modeled away on the left here is the behavioral cluster heading. There is actually a short definition that that sits to the right of it. That's optional, but it's kind of describing what this covers. And then underneath, there are, in this example, there are 6 questions. Okay, so that's what we mean by a behavioral cluster. It's a cluster of questions. And then if we move to the next rule, no more than 7 questions per cluster. Why? Well, it's all to do with time and rate of fatigue. If you keep piling in questions underneath a cluster, then you're going to wear people out. Actually, 4 questions per cluster, properly constructed, are usually enough to ensure reliability and validity. Now, there's a caveat to this, because over time we've constructed some questionnaires that only feature 3 behavioral clusters, in which case we've allowed up to 12 or so questions per cluster. Just remember the overall goal of between 30 and 40 questions in total. Most raters find the Click 360 sliders easier and quicker to answer. So we've timed that on average, 35 questions is taking approximately 15 minutes, 15 minutes using our sliders. Okay. So another rule of 7, this is again very idealistic, but the words in the question shouldn't be more than 7 in total. Each question should have no more than 7 words. And this will ensure that you're only asking one thing at a time, almost certainly. It's going to be less ambiguous and thereby make it easier and therefore quicker for raters to answer. The less is definitely more here. And the final tip in the rule of 7 is that each word should have no more than 7 letters. That makes it easy to understand and again aids completion time. So those are the 4 tips that we offer under the rule of 7. And here are 4 examples of questions that are taken from a selection of our off-the-shelf questionnaires, including EIQ and LeaderQ. Keeping questions short and to the point like this will serve to eradicate another questionnaire construction no-no, which is obviously the ambiguity caused by asking more than one thing at a time. That's just confusing. We can offer you another rule, if you like, within questionnaire construction, and that we call the 3 Ps. Now, we mentioned this in the marketing materials accompanying the webinar. So you need to keep each question personal, positive, and in the present tense. By personal, we mean make it about the individual. You know, as we're only using one questionnaire in our Click 360 application, which applies whether you're a self-rater, in other words, a participant, in other words, the person at the center of the 360, you're getting the report at the end. whether you are a self-rater or whether you are a reviewer of somebody, in other words, a rater, you're rating a colleague, it doesn't matter because our questionnaire needs to cover both options. So our questions assume the third person pronoun, but start with the verb, e.g., let me show you some examples. Sets personal example of what is expected, does what they say they'll do when they say they'll do it. Okay, so those are examples of questions that start with or assume the third person pronoun, but start with the verb. Okay, and they're therefore applicable to both the self-rater and someone rating that person. Now, by positive, and I want you to listen carefully to this description, because positive is what you want participants to work towards rather than what you want them to leave behind. I'm going to say that again. This is my way of showing you how important this is. We want you to write questions that lead participants towards something rather than away from what you want them to leave behind. So I'm sorry if you've invested a lot of effort in constructing a competency framework where you've got all the positive statements on the left and all the negative ones on the right, but I'm going to pour water on that firework because we don't believe there's any place for negative questions. And we come from this strengths-based approach where we show what finished looks like throughout the questionnaire, which is one reason why 360 can really help to embed a new competency framework. Telling someone not to think of a black cat actually leaves that person visualizing a black cat. Try it out. So keep it positive. And then the third part again is present tense. By present tense, we're just borrowing a leaf out of the book of affirmations, writing a specific observable behavior as if it's already happening is really the only way that works. Because when a rater, even a self-rater, thinks of the participant's behavior in relation to the question, there should be a healthy tension felt if the current behavior doesn't match the desired behavior. And it's this tension that's going to be necessary to motivate the participant to change. So here are some more examples. So that's the rule of the 3 Ps: personal, positive, and present tense. Okay, well, we're getting close to the end, and I just wanted to suggest a few tests that you can conduct on your own draft set of questions to see if they will prove fit for purpose. So let's start then with recapping the rule of 7. No more than 7 behavioral clusters, no more than 7 questions per cluster, no more than 7 words per question, and no more than 7 letters per word. Again, I repeat, I'll qualify, it's a stylistic or idealistic model, but try and get as close as you can. Keep wordsmithing, keep précising until you get as close as possible to that rule of 7. Now, one thing at a time would be good to remember. Check each question is only asking one thing. If there are one or more ands in the question, something, 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 and something, something, make sure that what follows the and is simply adding clarity and depth to what's written before the and, because if what follows is introducing something new, you've fallen into the trap of trying to ask 2 things in one question. Okay? Now, these 2 tests together should eliminate any ambiguity. But in terms of reliability, one test you can set is to select a small band of happy helpers and ask each one to complete the questionnaire several times over a period of days. Maybe at different times, in different locations, and in different situations. It would be especially helpful if at least one time they were feeling some kind of pressure, not about completing this test necessarily, but they're under some degree of stress, maybe a tight deadline or something. Because if each test tended to answer the question in the same way each time, then the questionnaire is likely to be consistently reliable. And I mentioned face validity earlier because it's relevant to a 360. Every question throughout your 360-degree feedback questionnaire should be validated, I beg your pardon, against the purpose of that questionnaire. So if the questionnaire is designed to build leadership capability, as an example, would scoring highly against each question likely depict a capable leader? And the ultimate validation is to give the questionnaire to a proven, well-respected, capable leader, somebody that's recognized as that, and then ensure that she or he scores highly. Better still, this can be carried out, the test can also be carried out by way of a 360 intervention. So if all raters score the individual participant highly, then you've proved the validity of that questionnaire. But being realistic, in our experience, there is sadly never enough time for this kind of test. Okay, so you may have to just resort to the obvious ones. Okay, so in summary, I hope I haven't overcomplicated things, but at the same time, I hope I've gotten some of the intricacies of questionnaire design across to you, even for a simple opinion poll, like a 360. If you'd like a copy of the slide deck that I've used, as well as my handout on reliability and validity, please don't hesitate to reach out using the contact details on screen now. If you'd like my team to vet your own questionnaire and pass it through the filters I've mentioned on this webinar, then please email me. There'll be a little cost for this, but it will be modest. Try us. So thanks for participating. I hope you'll join me for the number 3 webinar in our series. Remember, that's going to focus on how to interpret the 360 feedback report. And good luck with your 360-degree questionnaire design and your 360 projects in general.